that to multiply its value, instead of just selling the gas, to put it into transportation to Alaska, to mainly, not just for our own use, but to ship things to the rest of the world from Alaska's airports and seaports. So this is my proposition, that we use this natural gas to a much higher use. And with new technologies with fuel cells, to have a natural gas line built with the railroad through Canada, if not for export, at least to run the line, and the new fuel cell technology to efficiently turn that into electricity for running the railroad. $2 billion was the estimate for a slow railroad about 5-6 years ago. And a high-speed railroad electrified, I'm sure it would be 10 or so billion. But the potential for business through our airports and seaports, the potential for tourism, people coming not just from America by railroad, but from other parts of the world here, and taking either the ship down the coast or the railroad, a whole range of choices then. Not just air and ship, or impossible to drive yourself along the Alaska Highway, but all kinds of people could come up and think of a sleeper train driving up, or, through the Rockies with older Americans who don't like flying and want to take their time and enjoy it. And what a potential for tourism right away. But railroads are 1,000 times more efficient than other forms of transportation, but they've been monopolized up, and so they've been taken off the economic table basically in this country. We're vacating 2,000 miles of railroad per year in this country and building highways that are much less efficient next to them and taking out rail yards. But they've been monopolized up by banking interest and stuff, because they want to speculate. Sometimes rail land being sold off for other uses. When its highest use, and it's such a small amount of land, a railroad takes up very little space compared to a road or whatever. But monopoly interests have stagnated the railroads.
I'd like to see some of your numbers on the railroad use in the lower 48. I know last time I was down there, I remember seeing not just a single line of cars, but double-decker cars. They actually stack units on top of others so that they're more efficient, can actually carry more goods along the train route. And I have another question about the electrified natural gas. What are you talking about there?
Oh, a natural gas pipeline with the railroad.
Electrifying the line itself? Yeah.
Oh,
so are there any issues with wildlife or anything like that that might encounter an electrified line?
You have
Yeah, I can tell you a good deal about that. I'm the only one in this room that's ever worked on developing a railroad, so I can tell you that
a natural gas line along the railroad, and have facilities along that changes it to electricity, and overhead lines they use in separate from wildlife, and at key areas have it raised or whatever it might be.
Like they've done with the pipeline.
Yeah, so you don't interfere with wildlife. There's key areas where you'd have migration across there that you'd have to address, of course. As a child, I lived along the main line between Minneapolis and Chicago. It was a triple line. There's two lines where Amtrak's would go 90 miles an hour past each other in our town. They had to change the time that school let out to make sure that kids weren't out during that time. But
was that an electrified line?
No, but 90 miles an hour is what they used to go. Now they go nowhere near that, and it's only a single line. And trains have to wait for each other because they have inventory taxes and stuff, and it's ridiculous not to have a double line between major cities. A year ago or so, there was a train stuck in Florida somewhere because there wasn't a double line, and there was a freight accident, and they were totally stuck. It was like on the end of a line, and these people had to walk through the swamp and get picked up by buses because there's no other way to get them out of there. Ridiculous to not have a double line for major cities. But also when I was a kid, we used to play along the tracks, so they were always worried about issues there. But they had a little tiny pilot car, just a little, about the width of the tracks and square, that would fly down the tracks ahead of the trains. And if there's any problem, they'd radio them and they would get right on it. But that thing could stop on a dime. but it was just a couple miles ahead of the train flying down the tracks. So you knew one was coming, and it was safe that way. I don't know, in France, I don't think they've ever had accidents with their high-speed line because it's elevated, but tell us more about.
Just a few. Well, they have had one, but it was a truck that broke, the wheels that broke on it, disintegrated. On the catenary issue, or the electrification,
yes,
they require a catenary system that is untested in this region and are cold. Even though they have them in Scandinavia and Russia, they are not in the locations where there's a lot of the super cold. But that's one of the problems with electrification. We looked into that on the Denali railway system, and we proposed electrifying to begin with. And of course, there were no real good test case for what the cost of that was at the time, and we kind of come up with what happened with the intertie. The intertie, which is about 87 miles, it carries 300 megawatts, and that's maximum. And of course, the catenary system for the railroad's less than that, but it's still the same infrastructure. That was $130 million for that 87 miles, and that's on top of the cost of rail. The efficiency you get is that the driving units, the motive power, is generally runs about 40 years, and then you throw it away. But it's much better performance overall than the diesel electric, which break down more frequently. The advantage they have is they carry their power with them. So when you're looking at building rail, you're not only building the rail infrastructure, which is the ballast and the entire underground infrastructure, but you're also looking at building the rail and then putting catenary system on top of it to run an electrified train. And so unless you're going to have somebody to take that power along the way with it, whether it's sell it to customers that are along the path of the railway, that there's no way that you can amortize the cost of doing that to a train, to a railway. It's just, and we were just talking about 87 miles into Wonder Lake, which is just happened to be about the same length as the intertie.
This is what I was hoping for, to get lots of technical stuff to sort out the issues. So you have, what is the like comparison for per mile of railroad for the rail and everything else compared to the electrical system that goes with it? Like what percentage is
Well, that's one of the major problems that this whole system of building in Canada has brought up, is that if you take rail development, I'll give you two examples. The Alice Springs to Darwin rail that was completed about 3 years ago. It's about 150 years in the making. And its average cost in this last element was about $300,000 US dollars per mile. Bill Brodsky, who's the head of Montana Rail Link, which is owned by Denny Washington down in that area, they say they can build a mile of track on flat and level ground, or reasonably good ground, for about $600,000. When you start looking at what the costs are, their cost per mile ranges from somewhere between $2.5 million to $6 million a mile. So on the average right now, a mile of track is arguably between $1.35 million and $2.5 million per mile, in my view.